This morning we're reading from the 7th chapter of Mark. The Pharisees and some of the Levites who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were unclean, that is, they were unwashed. For the Pharisees and all Jews did not eat unless they gave their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. They observe many other traditions, such as cups and pitchers and kettles being washed. The Pharisees and the Levites asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with unclean hands?" And Jesus replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written these words, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men.' You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men. Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a man can make him unclean by going into him. It is what comes out of a man that makes him unclean." Word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. Song of Songs is, if you've never read it, it's a love story. It's a love poem, and Solomon wrote it, and he wrote this particular part from the feminine aspect about how wonderful, and what does it have? How biblical can it be to be talking about how beautiful her boyfriend is? How wonderful her intended is, how magnificent he is, just like a gazelle. So everything's so perfect about it. This is a prophecy about the coming of Christ. And when you read it in that aspect, when you take a look at what Solomon was talking about, when in the perfect one to come to us. So the Song of Songs isn't truly, it's written as a love story between the conversation between a man and the woman, and they love each other, and they're promising all these things, and they're espousing the love. They make a great love, great romance novel, written with beautiful language, but it's a prophecy about the coming of Christ. Look, here he comes. As graceful as a gazelle, as beautiful as anything that we have ever seen, how more wonderful than anything we've ever seen. And he wrote this thousands of years before Christ came. But he prophesied, just as Isaiah prophesied, just as Jeremiah prophesied, just as all of the Old Testament prophets. In their prophecies, there was the mention of the coming of Christ. And when he comes to fulfill the promises that were made. Paul wrote to be careful what you say. Once you fire a bullet, you can't get it back. Once you shoot an arrow, you can't get it back. And when you speak a word, you can't get it back. And that word may be more damaging than either the bullet or the arrow. I still remember that. You remember that old rhyme, "I shot an arrow into the air, it fell to earth, I knew not where. I breathed this song into the air, it fell to earth, I knew not where. But I found the poem in the heart of a friend, and I found the arrow in my pop's underwear." No, that's a different version. That's the one I learned. We can't take words back. I only regret once or 1,000 times saying something and wish I hadn't. If you're in that same category, yeah. Up to 1,000, over 1,000, shame on you. Up to 1,000, that's pretty normal. But the words that we use Just as Christ talked to the people about the words that we use demonstrate to others the purity of our heart. You can't go around blaspheming. I don't want to say cuss, but you can't go around cussing, using the name of the Lord in vain. You can't be angry all the time and not have people recognize that there's something wrong in your heart. Because if your heart's right, you can't be mad all the time. If your heart's right, you have to find goodness and grace. If you remember the thing that I read last week, same words, different attitude. Same words, different direction. Same words that hurt, now heal. But most of all, it's the attitude that we bring to those words. And the Levites were hypocrites because they had established a whole 700 rules from the Ten Commandments. And one of them was that you never eat with unclean hands, so you have to wash your hands. We stayed one time in a condo that we had borrowed from some Orthodox Jews, and we made sure that we took paper plates with us because they had certain plates that were good for dairy, and some that were good for meat, and some that were good for vegetables. And you never ever put meat on a dairy plate. And you haven't if you ever put meat on a vegetable plate. I mean, you just didn't do that. It sounds picky, but it has some logic to it. The major source of bacteria, salmonella, is dairy products. So you didn't put your meat someplace where it was likely to be contaminated with salmonella. But it was a religious rule that says you don't put them on the same plate. And there's a certain, I don't know what it is, but there's a certain pattern to washing and putting away the plates and saucers and stuff that you use for dinners. Because the rules say so. Remember, there's a story of Jesus and the disciples who were walking across the field of wheat on the Sabbath, and they stopped long enough to grab a few heads. I don't know if you've ever done this, and you go and pop it in your mouth and eat it. You didn't grow up on a farm, or you know how to do that. And they stopped them and said, you guys ate out there and it's the Sabbath. You harvested something to eat on the Sabbath. And at the same time they criticized Jesus because he had healed the lame man on the Sabbath. And his question, is it wrong to do good things on the Sabbath? Is it wrong to do good in God's name on the Sabbath? When is it wrong to do good things? Only when it violates man's rules. Because God never put good things in a category by themselves and said, do it by the timetable, do it by the calendar, do it in regard for the rules of man. Because you may not know this, but the Methodist Church has rules called the Book of Discipline, about that thick with real thin paper. And it's all the things that you do or don't do in the Methodist Church. Now, for the most part, I don't even open it. And I hope you don't either. And I hope you don't mention to Dan next week that our pastor never looks at the Book of Discipline. I'd appreciate that. It's everything that you need to do, you have to do. There are certain things that we have to do. The Methodist Church has a trust deed. I don't know whether you're familiar with trust deeds or not. We got to build this church. And we get to pay for this church. And we get to maintain this church. But we can't sell this church without permission from the conference. Because they have a trust deed on the property. And that's to prevent some crazy guy like me taking the congregation and wiping it out and selling off the church and heading for the hills with the money. That's one of the rules. Another rule is that we have certain privileges that are granted, or duties that are granted. You know, I told you I'm going to the National Fellowship of Associate Members and Local Pastors. That's a lot of letters. I'm going there as a local pastor. Now, an elder is not invited to go there. If you've been ordained, gone to seminary and been ordained and all that stuff, we don't want you at our meetings. You'll contaminate us. We know God and you know the rules. And the danger is that we get so enamored with titles, we get so enamored with letters and words about each other that we forget that God ordained each and every one of us to be a minister in His kingdom. I'm going to pick on somebody who's here. Nancy and I went into Kohl's the other day. She had made a purchase and it was the wrong color. If you can imagine Kohl's selling something the wrong color, I just can't believe that. This time it happened. And the manager met us at the door, not because she was waiting for us, but because she was there and she directed us where we ought to be and was so busy doing all the things that she does. But she took just a moment or so to take care of a customer who came in. I think that's probably Kohl's rules. You take care of customers, right? That's their first rule. Take care of a customer. And it was a good experience. We were satisfied and you were busy. And we thank you for taking time to be nice. When's the last time you took time to be nice? When is the last time that you went and out of your way to do something for somebody you didn't know? Or somebody who was not maybe a total stranger, but almost? We don't do that very often, and we don't do it very well. But Jesus walked through the crowds, and the woman with the problem touched the hem of His robe, and he was healed. And He said, "You are healed by your faith." Jesus never said, "I healed you." He said, "You are healed by your faith." And He asks us to have the same confidence in the words that He gives to us, the words of love and passion and concern for each other, just as He had for the people around Him. It never says that He healed a rich person. Now, He might have, except that rich person would have had to have enough faith in Jesus to be healed. And we read the stories of healing in the Bible, and we want that kind of healing in our lives. We want it now, right now. And it doesn't always come. How many times did people go to Jesus? Oh, we know last week He said when He challenged the people around Him, they left because they did not have enough faith in the words of Jesus to be drawn to Him and to be truly a disciple. Words are tough. We say them without thinking about what they mean to others. We had a foreign student, 1975, from Chile. Picked him up at the bus where the foreign students got off, got into our car, and he said, "I do not speak much English." And I said, "I don't speak any Spanish, so we're in a world of hurt." He came to our house on the night that Richard Nixon resigned. He said, "Where will Richard Nixon go now?" And we said, "He'll go to California." No, he said, when a president is overthrown, he has to leave the country or they'll kill him. We said, "No, he goes to California to his house." He said, no, he must leave the country. He can't be safe here. And we said, "Well, he's going to California. That's about as foreign as you can get." It took a lot of conversation to try to tell him, no, we don't kill our ex-presidents. Boy, that would be a good idea, you know. I just had a thought there for a moment. Strike that. But the really foolish thing my wife did was they played the Star Spangled Banner. And we stood up in our living room. And she said to Luis, "Does Chile have a national anthem?" He sang 11 verses before she stopped him. He'd go. She said, as he was going up the stairs to his bedroom, "Sleep tight." And he stopped and looked at her with this incredulous look on his face and says, "What is sleep tight?" We say it all the time, right? Sleep tight. Have a good evening. What is sleep tight? Words that we use that we find so comfortable can be so devastating to people around us. And Jesus asks simply, taste your words before you say them. Paul wrote, control your tongue if you're truly a Christian. Because that tongue will belie your beliefs, it will belie your loyalty, it will belie your passion if you let it get away from you. Words. Jesus spoke words. But he also said, the rules are words. Not of love, not of comfort, but of man's desires. Love one another as I have loved you. Love your enemies as you love yourself. Love your neighbor. He spoke about love all the time. The Song of Songs. If you haven't read it, take your Bible down and read the Song of Songs. It gets pretty passionate. It gets steamy. And it's in the Bible. I don't know whether the Baptists actually read it or they tape those pages or staple them together so they don't get to read it. But just read the Song of Songs and remember as you read it, it's not about a man and a woman, but it's about a church welcoming a Christ. And if we can only have the same passion as we welcome Christ into our lives, what joy we have. Words cannot express the joy we have. Amen. Lord, I want to be a Christian, number 402. Let's sing it like we mean it.
In my heart.
Taste your words before you spit them out, so that you don't have to eat them later. But know that God is with you, not because of rules, but because of love. Go in peace, knowing that He is with you. A peace that passes all understanding, a peace of truly being one with God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Morning, John. How are you? Good to see you. Morning. Oh, yes.